Alma Martinez, a powerhouse, a shining star, an awarded actor and director, and a warm-hearted good person that I am grateful to call my friend. I'm going to give the stage to Alma, and she'll articulate more specifically her relationship with Luis and with Lupe, and in doing that, she will then introduce our guest of honor, Luiz Valdez, to you today. Thank you.
My name is Alma Martinez, and I want to introduce you to Cynthia and her Pachuquito son, Randy.
Randy, what's your favorite movie? Zootsuit. Your favorite character? Was it the Pachuco? Because you're dressed like the Pachuco. Yeah? Yeah. And do you remember how he stood? Do you remember how he stood in the film? Do you know how to do it?
The other day, hello everyone. Nice to chat with you. I was raised in Pico Rivera. I was born in Monclova, Coahuila, first generation college. And last night at Laverne, I talked about how when I got out of high school, I got a full scholarship to USC, and then I lasted like a semester, second semester, I left that place. And you know where I landed? Here. This is where someone knew my name. This is where someone said, where were you? You weren't in class today. This is where someone said, you're going to get a PhD one day. This is where someone said, you're going to be an actor. And this small university, this jewel of a university, of college, excuse me, is what really, really gave me the direction and force. But talking about direction, this is why I'm here today. The reason I was lost at USC is because as a person, I didn't know who I was. You've got to know who you are to go forward in life. And part of it, and my personality is looking back. I'm always looking for connections. My family, cousin, ¿quién es primo? ¿Quién es tía? Your name is Carranza, are you from Ocampo? Your name is Martinez, are you from Piedras Negras? Always looking for connections because we were so uprooted when we were young. So what happened was I was here at Whittier College, and by the way, we were raised Chicano. No, that was a dirty word in my house. We weren't Mexicanos, right? Mexicanos. And we weren't raised as Chicanos. Well, I came to Whittier College, and this theater company, I never knew about Chicano theater ever, named Teatro Campesino was here. And I saw them, they did Carpa, I met Diane, JD, I think Socorro was there, Alan, and my jaw dropped. I went, what am I seeing? What is this? I was already interested in acting, but more importantly, what they were saying. Because nobody was saying that to us. And I must tell you, the reason this young boy who's here, little Randy who came up, something spoke to him about his culture, even at that age. So the power of art and culture, which Luis will talk about, but that's what got me. So I took a 4-hour bus ride. I remember I didn't have a car. I lived right here on Painter to Claremont colleges. They were doing a workshop, and I went. And then I didn't know, 4 years later, when I got back from, I studied at the Universidad de Mexico, Nacional de Mexico, the theater program. I left there because there was a pocha, but I got great training, but I wasn't Mexican. I thought I failed here, so I must be Mexican. Well, I wasn't Mexican. I came back, auditioned for Teatro Campesino, and that's the end of the story. That's it. That's the happy ending. As they say, if it all works out in the end, and if it hasn't, it isn't the end yet. So it worked out because then I knew who I was, and that made all the difference in the world. So I count all the productions I've been blessed to work with Luis and Lupe and the teatro as the most important, how do you say, identity, personal esteem, creative, artistic, creative period of my entire life, and I will always hold it close to my heart. And I saw them here at Whittier College. So for me, I'm now a professor. It all begins and ends, it always has, in education. So when you talk about theater for me, it's something very personal, but it's education. Education, because that's how we're getting our messages in our community still. And our Pachuquito Randy is an example of that. Anyway, it's my great pleasure to introduce my dear friend, director, colleague, Luiz Valdez.
Well, thank you, Alma. Thank you, Whittier College, for this invitation, and also Laverne University. The combination has been wonderful. Thank you, Jennifer Holmes, for being our guide and escort here. It's great to be back at Whittier. And this playhouse is what? How old is this playhouse?
25 years.
25 years. So it wasn't here in 1972 when El Teatro Campesino performed at Whittier for the first time. It was the height of the Vietnam War, and if I may say so, the depths of the Nixon administration. And as young people of draft age, we were literally opposing the war in Vietnam, which really wasn't a declared war, it was a police action like Korea. And we objected and protested to the draft, the draft and the endless drift of that war. And the fact is that at that time, Mexican Americans, or Latinos in general, were only 6% of the population in the United States. But we were 20% of the casualties in the front lines in Vietnam. So it seemed to us that it needed direct action, not just to protest the war with all our colleagues across the country that were protesting, the African Americans, the white radicals, the Asians that were protesting, even women, of course, many women were serving in Vietnam, but not as soldiers the way they could be now. But we joined this in an effort to try to stop the war. And we were basically very young people of college age, even high school age, that actually did in fact stop the war. We reversed the direction of the State Department and of the Nixon administration. Before that, the Lyndon Johnson, the LBJ administration. It goes all the way back to Kennedy. But we came here then, that year of 72, I forget exactly which month it was, but the war was raging. I think it was before the electoral season had begun that fall, the 72 elections. And there was a rumor at the time that Nixon and Spiro Agnew, his vice president, were going to call off the presidential elections and declare martial law. There was so much protest. And so in these times of troubled electoral results, it helps to know a little bit of history and to have lived it, as I have and as the Teatro has for over 50 years, to have seen the highs and lows of our struggle, and also at the same time to see progress. Actually here, how many of you saw the Teatro in 72? Oh, good, wow. Yeah, you saw that, yeah. Well, there was an older man here, a Chicano, Mexicano, who came up to me. Well, we know that Nixon, this is his hometown, you know, Richard Nixon was from here, and his father had a drugstore downtown. And at that time, Richard Nixon was a kid on a bike. And so this Chicano, this old man, told us this story. He wasn't that old actually, but he was old enough to know Nixon. And so he says, no, ya, aquí estaba, una botica. We had a drugstore right here, you know, by Nixon's father. And his father used to send him out into the neighborhoods with, to take orders, you know, for the pharmacy, for the drugstore. And then Nixon would deliver them, you know. So he said, pues yo conocía a Nixon, I knew him, you know. Yo le di órdenes a Nixon. I gave Nixon orders, you know, orders for the pharmacy, of course. But anyway, that was a crack up. But I've never forgotten that little story. I love little stories like that. And actually everybody has a link, you know, to history in their own way. History happens in local places, in localities. And it happens to human beings. It happens to people that are absolutely ordinary, like you and me. And it doesn't matter who they claim to be or who they think they are. They're just people. They're just human beings. Which raises the question for me, and it is the fundamental question that I always pose as an artist and as a playwright, is what is the nature of the human being? This is something that educational institutions like Whittier College and the University of Laverne, it's their duty and their responsibility, their fiat, to address what is the nature of the human being. And of course, right away, humanity will break itself down into races, the black and white stuff. But that's a lie. That's not, that's a distortion of reality. That's a misperception of the human race. There is no such thing as race. Now that we have DNA, We can decode anybody's genetic makeup and find out that most of us, all of us, are mongrels at some point. That we mix all kinds of stuff. You wouldn't believe it looking at me, because I'm mostly Yaqui, I suppose. But even in Mexico, among the Yaqui Indians in Sonora in northern Mexico, they don't look at me and say, yeah, they don't see a Yaqui. Say, you don't look Yaqui, you know. You look like you're more like from Oaxaca, you know, because I'm short, you know, or they think of me as short, you know. And I tell people, don't think of me as short. Think of me as a coiled spring, okay? And so the thing is that I'm like Benito Juarez, and I got a chance to play Benito Juarez in a film I shot in Mexico called The Cisco Kid. It was a remake, and I shaved off my mustache, which I had had for 40-some years. And so there it was, man, cara de nalga, you know, in the morning, without a mustache, right? And I thought I would look like my dad, but I looked in the mirror, oh my God, I look like my mom. But anyway, Juarez was even short. You know how tall Benito Juarez was? 4'11". Benito Juarez was 4'11". That's incredible, because the whole history of Mexico hinges on this one little indito, who was not so little in the final analysis. He was a contemporary with Abraham Lincoln. And Abraham Lincoln, as a matter of fact, received his wife and children in the White House during the Civil War. And because he acknowledged Juarez and the importance of the fight that Benito Juarez's government was raging against the French, you know. Anyway, it goes back to what is the nature of the human being. So there's this 4'11" giant in Mexican history. But then if you really begin to look closely at all our forefathers, they weren't that tall either. Washington was 6 feet, that's granted. But he had to be, he was big, you know, he was a big guy. There's the leader, you know. People are really crude, you know, who's the boss around here? What's the tall guy? Oh, okay, yeah, you know. That's a misperception. But, you know, tall is good, and yeah, everything, short is good too. I have no back problems, okay? But in any case, the fact is that what is the nature of the human being on every level? And the last 50-some years with Teatro Campesino has allowed us the opportunity to be able to evolve an aesthetic that deals directly with theater, which we call the vibrant being. But it deals really with that question. So what is the human being? We go back to our Mayan ancestors to get some answers, and out of there come some very significant 4 parts. It's 4 movement, what they call Nawi Olin, the cuatro movimiento, 4 movement. And there are 4 stages of the human being. The first part is what they call your reptilian mind, and it's your physicality. So the physicality is really important. You know, you are first and foremost as an infant, alive in your body as an infant. So what you do with your body becomes part of your growth as a human being. How well do you know your body? Are you acquainted with your body? Do you move your body? Because sooner or later, your parts will begin to wear out. You know, your parts will begin to wear out. They'll need replacement or amputation or what, because that's nature. That's nature. So you gotta take care of them. Take care of your body. Okay, don't abuse your body, because it's through there that all the rest happens. But especially right here, the heart. Take care of your heart. Take care of your pump. So the exercise part, you know, is good because you get a certain, you know, level of exercise, cardial exercise that you need. And at the same time, you need to breathe. And this, it seems elementary, but it is. It's amazing how many people don't understand what they're doing. You know, Coca-Cola, any Coca-Cola has been shown now, medically, it's like poison for your body. So watch out, cut back on the Cokes. I used to be a Diet Coke fiend until I stopped. I cold turkey. No more Cokes, no more Cokes, you know. And so I just chose, that's your choice, it's your choice. I have a Coke once in a while, I say absolutely no. But the thing, you gotta respect your body. And I learned really my body as a farm worker. I was born into a migrant family in Delano, California in 1940. Now, California was a very different place. 6 million people, at most 350,000 Mexicans or Latinos, a few Puerto Ricans thrown in, Dominicans, but mostly Mexicanos. And 120,000 or so Japanese Americans, maybe 100,000 Chinese, even less African Americans, because they hadn't gotten to the West Coast yet. And so what happened then is that California was basically white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. That's not necessarily all bad. I love this little city of Whittier, and I know the Quakers established it. And even though they produced Nixon, nevertheless, I remember Nixon standing at the podium in Washington, the White House, before he resigned. It's his last day, and he's talking to his staff, and he's weeping, and it was amazing, man, to see the president just sobbing at the microphone, saying, "My mother was a saint," you know. Well, I believe him. Yeah, she was a Quaker. She was probably a very nice woman. She didn't know her son was going to turn out to be a shit, you know. Because, I mean, he got involved in the political process. You know, he blackballed Helen Gahagan Douglas, you know, who was a very liberal senator from California back in the 40s, and he called her a pinko, and yeah, that whole anti-communist business, because he was a very ambitious politician. Anyway, Nixon and all that group, you know, were part of the Quakers that established the city here, and I applaud that. I think it's wonderful. Southern California as a whole, I've been studying California history for years. It's an amazing phenomenon. It hadn't happened elsewhere in the world that so many cities were pre-designed and set up within the space of a generation or two in the 20th century. I mean, all of these cities, you know, Whittier and Laverne, you know, you could go all the way down, all of them were created by real estate companies and say, we're going to sell houses, we're going to bring in people on the train, in cars, we're going to sell homes, and all of that was a massive movement that resulted in what California is today. I mean, from one part of the state to the other. We are now at 35 to 40 million people, pushing within 20 years, effectively toward 50 million. And 40% of those are Latinos. 40%. And then another large percentage are Asians. So within 20 years, the majority of the people in California are going to be either Asian or Latinos. It's called Valley of the Heart. It's my latest play. Actually, as a playwright, you don't know exactly when you're creating something, what you're creating, you're just kind of going by impulse in the creative process. And I realized I've started to write a play called Zoot Suit. And I see that we have some very special guests here. The main inspiration for Zoot Suit, which is now being revived at the Marte Forum, it will open the 50th anniversary season in January. We start rehearsals on January 3rd. Tomorrow I go back to the casting process over at the Taper, but the thing is that we open officially February 12th and run into March. And there will be a whole new cast, but the characters remain the same, the story remains the same. And the one character that really attracted me was a young man by the name of Henry Labas. And I'm he was supposedly the leader of the 38th Street gang at the time. There weren't gangs then like the gangs now, it was very different. But they thought they were. The authorities thought that these gangs were really bad. But no, actually there was leadership, there was brilliance, there was human presence in these gangs, and the family members of Henry Labas are here with us today. And Lillian Villegas, please stand up and take a bow. One of the sisters. There we go. And many of the members that I met of the family, Lillian's mom and dad, I met them at their home. Lupe, her sister, who's also a character in the play. Rudy, his brother, who's also a character in the play. I got to meet all of them. The only one I didn't meet was Hank. And when we were shooting the movie, I was talking to the whole audience, and it brought me to tears, actually. It was involuntary, because Hank wasn't there. Before we opened on Broadway, I had a dream. I don't know if I've ever told you, Lily, but there was a dream that I had before opening night, the night before opening night on Broadway. And then we'd gone through that whole process of New York, and the play was running at the Aquarius. It had been ran for a year, and there we are in New York City about to embark. The Winter Garden Theater, where My Fair Lady was done, you know, the Beatlemania had been there. It's a huge, big house, you know, on Broadway, right on Broadway. Broadway and 57th, I believe. But anyway, I had a dream, and I dreamt that I went to a prison, except that all of the inmates were dead. All of the inmates were dead people. And I was alive, and all of the visitors that went to the visiting center were alive. And so I went into the visiting room. They had the little windows and the chairs, and I sat down and waited. And then way over there, I saw a little door open, and a guard came through and opened the door, and Hank Labas came out. And he came walking, and he sat down in the chair directly opposite me, and looked at me with those eyes, burning eyes. And I thought, uh-oh, you know, I'm confronting him. He's confronting me. And then he smiled. And he says, I like what you did with my play. And that was the review. That was the review of my life, I'm telling you. Because, you know, there was something very, very special about Hank Leibas. I call him Hank Reina in the play, but he's Hank Leibas. And now that we're casting and doing costume designs and revisiting all of the historical materials again, I'm getting to see photographs of Hank that I hadn't seen before. And you know, he stands out. He stands out as someone who was totally self-possessed. In the middle of all this oppression that was happening in the 1940s against the Pachucos and the Zoot Suiters by the law, there's this guy who's standing there and is still able to smile. And something about his eyes tell you that he was completely self-possessed. Now, I don't suppose Hank got a chance to go to college, did he, Billy? Did he go to high school? He went to high school. But he was a Chicano. He was one of the first Chicanos who became a template for a whole new generation that came after him and generations to this very day. And I think we need to acknowledge that. Because even though the law saw him as a criminal, that's not unusual. We have a whole prison industry now in this country where we've imprisoned more people than any other country in the world because they're imprisoning Latinos and African Americans. And the case, the Sleepy Lagoon case that Hank was involved in with the other guys, and the Zoot Suit riots that happened, set a template in this country about who Latinos are, who people of color are. And they were criminalized way back when. So in my play, I try to tell a different story. And that story could not be told by a psychologist, it could not be told by a priest, it could not be told by anybody safe. I had to find a storyteller that represented everything that I needed to say. And so that became El Pachuco. And Eddie Olmos played El Pachuco. And my brother Daniel played Hank. And they were a tremendous duo because they're two parts of the same being. And again, in my way then with Zoot Suit, I was trying to answer the question, what is the nature of the human being? And what I saw then in Zoot Suit, in the whole case that led to Zoot Suit, was the process, the miracle really, of cultural fusion in America. Cultural fusion is a fact of our life. It's what makes really America exceptional. Not other things that people claim are very exceptional about the country. It's the people and what the people have done with each other. They have fused. You wouldn't have Pachucos without the African Americans. You wouldn't have the Zoot Suit without the African Americans. You wouldn't have any of that phenomenon without jazz. And that came out of, again, African American experience. But by the same token, though, African Americans were also exposed to Latino culture through New Orleans. So what happened then is it was a cultural fusion that happened. And that combined with all of the white kids, the Irish kids, and the Jewish kids, and the straight-on Anglo-Okie kids, that also liked the beat of the swing music and the look of the Zoot Suit and the style. And that became then a new expression of American identity. The old-fashioned identity, the square, straight, Protestant, not Protestant, take that away, the conservative, yeah, you can be Protestant, be liberal as hell, doesn't matter. The conservative group that couldn't approve of this new phenomenon in America because it was multiracial and because it represented miscegenation to them. Also, they had to condemn it as something terrible and something frightening and something scary. Something scary. But the impact of the Pachuco went even further. You wouldn't have Elvis. Elvis Presley was wearing a DA, a ducktail. Okay? The way he combed his hair, you wouldn't have had Elvis without the Pachucos, without Hank Leyva. A lot of people don't realize that. That this is culture, this is living stuff. This is a legacy that gets passed on from hand to hand. And so as a playwright, I try to deal with, but I come back to the question, what is the nature of the human being? And this business, what does this mean? That means self-possession. Some people it means defiance. You know, the way Chucos sit on the street corner, ready to fight, actually. And the Pachuco used to fight with kickboxing. Boom, boom, boom. kickboxing. It's kind of like capoeira. You know, you gotta call it for what it is, but it wasn't identified. It says, these pachucos, they use knives. No, as a matter of fact, they were using their bodies. And where did they use their bodies? In the fields. In the fields. Now, I'm a farm worker. At base, I started life as a farm worker. I started working when I was 6 years old in the fields. And it determined what I was going to do with the rest of my life. But the one thing I remember learning a lesson from an old man, and we were out there weeding, the psychic, you know, you're cutting the weeds off of, I forget what crop. But anyway, you're down there with a short hoe, and you're bending, and you're young, so you feel full of spunk. But this old man saw me going in there. He said, no, wait a minute, espérate. He says, if you're going to do that, put one hand behind your back. And then the other one work with the hoe. And you know, it worked, it helped. I said, wow. Because when you're a farm worker, you have to learn the economy of your body. And people think, okay, farm workers are illiterate and they're unskilled. The hell they're unskilled. Now, if you had to pick onions, do you know the difference between leeks and other forms of onions? Do you know how to pick peaches? It's not easy, it's got a lot of fuzz. Do you know how to pick pears? With pear, you have to have a ring. You know how to pick apricots. You know how to distinguish where something is ripe and not ripe. Strawberries. Everybody loves strawberries, but you know what it takes? A big, strong uña, man, to clip off. To clip off the stem, because it's going to mark it. And then you've got to work like this all day. Men and women. So what does that do? It acquaints you with your body. El cuerpo. In my case, I had an event early on in life. I was born in 1940. The following year, in 41, we are in San Martin, living in a barn. We're farm workers, migrant farm workers. It's over by Gilroy, you know, the garlic capital of the world, going towards San Jose, Garden of Eden. And so we're living in the barn, and the farmer took out the horses and put in the Mexicans, you know, fair change, you know. And so we're living among the hay, and we used to carry our own stove, our portable stove, which was made from an old tina, an old tub, with a hole cut in the side. And so my mom and my tia, my aunt, would put the wood in the side, you know, and they cooked. And the top of the bottom of the tin tub became the griddle, and that's where they could cook tortillas or heat the food. And then when we had to move on, you just put it on the truck, vámonos, you know, that was our stove. Well, one morning, we were preparing, going out to work, and in a moment of carelessness, someone left a little pan of hot water heating on the griddle. And no one noticed, you know, and my little sister, my little cousin Ernestine could walk, a little older than me. I was just starting to walk. And what she did, she came along and saw the pan and grabbed it, full of boiling water. And it was hot, so she dropped it, it tipped over and fell on my back. Yeah. And so I screamed, passed out, so they tell me. I wasn't there. I mean, I didn't know what was happening. But anyway, my dad grabbed a blanket, wrapped me up, and they took me to the nearest hospital, which was in Gilroy, about 10 miles away. And it was a white hospital, you know, in those days, 1941. So here they have this Mexican kid, this Mexican migrant, coming in with his parents. They don't know what to do with me. They didn't have an ICU. Today, I'd be in the burn unit, because when nurses opened up the blanket, all the skin on my back and part of my face fell off. Yeah, and my mother, who had lost my brother before me from a congenital intestinal problem, was very afraid that she was going to lose her third son. And so she said, "Mi hijo te estaba muriendo." She used to tell me, "I thought you were dying." But you know, the thing is that there was no ICU. It was 1941. It's a white hospital. I mean, I wasn't there, so I can't testify to all of that. I'm really channeling my mom, because she told me they didn't want to put you in. So they did. They put some salve on my back, and actually they did a good thing. They turned me back to my mother to go back to the barn, the horse barn. The thing is, I've always believed that any negative can be turned into a positive. That's another thing you need to know about yourself. You're a negative and positive being, okay? And your electrical charge is always going from negative to positive, negative to positive, negative to positive. This is what keeps you moving, keeps your heart pumping. It keeps your whole electrical nervous system moving. You need to know that about yourself, because you can control it. You can get more positive. Any negative that you hit, turn it into a positive. And that's what happened to me. Because for the next 6 months of my life, of the second year of my life, I slept on my mother's chest. She was afraid to let me roll over onto my injured back, my skinless back. I had been flayed. Like the Aztec god Xipitotec, I had been flayed. And so, God bless her, my mom, she was 20 years old at the time. So I slept for the next 6 months, heart to heart. Heart to heart. And my food was right there. Because I was breastfed, you know. As a matter of fact, I was breastfed until I was 2 years old, you know. Seemed bad when something, you know. You know. Mamando, you know, because she gave me all her love. Heart to heart. And the heart is the most essential part of the human being. I don't mean that just as the physical organ. It's pretty important. You can't live without your heart. I mean it and everything that it implies, because it's also a very delicate instrument that registers emotion. Your heart beats, picks up a beat when you get excited or when you get angry, and it's there. People die of heart attacks. Why are so many people dying of heart attacks? Well, it has something to do with disillusionment. It has to do with the sense of, how can I deal with this life? I don't want to go on, and so people die. And, or the clot, you know, medicine will tell you, oh no, the arteries were clogged and it was really bad. Well, try the emotions first. Let's go back. Where is your feeling of being at home and being content and being complete with it? Being in yourself, where does that come from? It comes from your life. It comes from your life. A lot of people don't realize that they have a direct relationship to reality. Okay? This is not real. This is an extension of me, just like I'm an extension of you. And everybody around you is an extension of you. And you have the power, whether you know it or not, to influence that. This is why dreams are so important. This is why ambition has to do with re-envisioning your life and saying, I'm going to be that. The young Alma Martinez deciding as a student somewhere along the line that she was going to have a PhD. And not only that, she was also going to be in the movies. She would be a star. She was going to be seen. And she was going to be an educator. All of that came out of dreams and belief in self. You know, and I've known her long enough to know that she's a fighter. But you know, the fact is that the fight begins with your heart. You got to have connections there. How do you feel about yourself? And you got to begin to feel better. So physically is the first step that the Mayans indicated, the physicality. Okay, the physicality of the body. Now, as a director and as a playwright, I love to do that. I love body work. Okay, so all my works have music and dance and action. You know, because I believe in high school I was a gymnast. Okay, thank God for the Greeks. Because, I mean, I was a tumbler, and, you know, I did the rings and all that, you know. The long horse, even though I was short, I did the long horse, you know, the trampoline, you know. Which brings me back to my first role in the theater, because my first role in the theater is as a chango. I was a monkey in my first role in the theater. And I'll tell you that story. In 1946, we're in the Garden of Eden in San Jose. And then we come back over the valley, back in the San Joaquin Valley, to pick cotton. And everybody was a cotton picker then. It's 1946. I mean, it starts after the war. There was a slight depression after the war because all the GIs came back. People were looking for work. See, things change. And they're not always there. You got to study your history to know how we got here, you know. But in World War II then, all these people, actually World War II was a good time for my family because after I got burned, we came back to the San Joaquin Valley in 41, and my dad went to work for a Japanese-American farmer. Then came Pearl Harbor. Then that Japanese farmer and his family were all rounded up and sent to the concentration camp, the way the Japanese Americans here in Little Tokyo. Little Tokyo was emptied out in downtown LA. All the Little Tokyos were emptied out. And the people were sent, 120,000 Americans, Japanese Americans, were concentrated in camps on Indian land, by the way. These were old Indian reservations where they put the Japanese Americans, you know. In any case, my dad went to work for a Japanese farmer, and then once he was out, the army turned to the farm workers that were working there in all those camps and branches, and my dad was one of the beneficiaries. He said, how do you like to take over this ranch? So my dad began to ranch his ex-employer's ranch. My first memories are of that ranch. I thought, well, we got land, you know, we got 2 houses, we got animals. My dad used to farm with mules, which helped, because there wasn't too much gas then. But then we had the first braceros that arrived were working for my dad. They were coming from Mexico, working as braceros on our farm. And you know something else? German prisoners of war. We had POWs. German, the Nazis, you know. I learned that word really young. I know Nazis, I know Nazis, working with Germans, you know. And the thing is that after the war, all of that went away. It disappeared in an instant. And my dad lost the farm because he never owned it. I thought we were rich, you know. I asked my older brother, what happened, man? We were rich. He said, we weren't rich, man. It wasn't our farm. It belonged to a Japanese-American farmer. What? And I realized something terrible had happened. That all these Japanese Americans had been, and I was only 6. Anyway, what happened then is that we went back on the migrant path, and there we are in Corcoran before you know it. You know where Corcoran is in Central Valley? There's a big state prison there now. You know? And what started with Hank and the 38th Street Gang has become an industry. Has become an industry in California. Please be wise and conscious about what's happening in your state. And in the country, in Arizona too. Arizona's taking a lot of people. So what happened is that the prison industry was eventually privatized. So they make money off of Latinos and Asian and African Americans in prison. Each one of those is like part of the profit margin. And so they took the stereotype that was created with the Sleepy Lagoon case and expanded it to a national phenomenon, and they started creating prisons, you know, in order to make money. In those days, though, Corcoran was not the prison where Charlie Manson resides, you know, and where Robert Downey Jr. was a guest recently. It was just a farm worker area. So we were in a big, large camp and living off of the river, but the cotton season ended real quick, and so we couldn't move on. My dad's truck was broken down. And so then we used to fish in the San Joaquin Delta, in the river, to eat. My mother would make the tortillas, not tamales, tortillas, frijoles, you know. And then my dad and my brother and I would bring the fish, you know. Fish tacos before they were trendy, you know. In any case, one morning I almost drowned in the river, and my dad pulled me up by the hair. My mother got really scared. She said, maybe you and your brother better go to school, because a big yellow bus used to drive into the camp. So we climbed on the bus and went to school, and I went with Mama's tacos in a little brown paper bag. Yeah, my size, Hasina. I don't know where she got it, because there were paper shortages in the 1940s and after the war. So she used to make the tacos. There's nothing like Mama's tacos in the morning. Nice and warm, you know. Good love, cariño from my mama. She was going to feed me, you know, with the tacos. And I put it in the closet lunchtime. I take it out. There, a big disillusionment for me, because the other kids, particularly the Anglo kids, had lunch pails. My God, look at these things. They were metal. They were Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse on the side, or Hopalong Cassidy. I couldn't believe it. They opened it up, and there was this production in there. They opened it up, and they pulled out these 2 pieces of white board, you know, on wax paper. Oh no, there's white bread. Yeah, I had never really eaten bread there. Sandwiches, believe it or not. I was born here, but here we are, and there's these sandwiches with ham and cheese and tomatoes and lettuce, the whole thing, the whole shebang. It was great. I thought, wow, look at that. And not only that, they also pulled out an apple or an orange or a cupcake. And here's the kicker, a thermos with milk or Coca-Cola. And I said, wow, man. And then I looked at my little bag, and my little bag looked really sad. And you know, tacos, burritos, they're nice and warm and plump, you know, when they're warm. And then they get cold and they get kind of shriveled, you know. You know? So I was embarrassed, man. I was ashamed of my mother's tacos, you know. I was ashamed that I was ashamed, but I had to have lunch, so I stopped to the corner, you know. And the kids would say, what are you eating? No, nothing, you know. And they kept bugging me, you know, and I kept looking at their sandwiches, they kept looking at my tacos, I kept looking. One day the inevitable happened, we exchanged lunches, and the rest is Taco Bell history. I go back to the closet one day after school, and the bus is starting to leave. I'm looking for my bag to take it back to my mom. The teacher sees me, it's gone. And I said, what happened? She says, I took it. You know, you took it, give it back to me. She says, I can't. And she escorted me into a little room and behind her desk, and there was my bag, all ripped up, floating in a basin of water. And I said, well, you're loca la maestra, you know, she's gone, berserk. And no, and she said, look at this. And she took a piece of the bag, dipped it in some white paste, and put it on a face. It was a mold. It was a clay. It was an animal. That was a monkey. And then she took another piece and spread it out, another piece and spread it out. She said, you want to try it? I said, yeah. So I spread it out. And at that moment, I discovered one of the secrets of the universe is called paper mache. A big revelation. You can take newspapers and bags and turn them into something. That was amazing to me. And I said, wow, and it's already November, so I couldn't be for Halloween. What's the mask for? And she says, it's for a play. It's for a play. And next week we're having auditions. So I forgave her about the bag. And the next week I auditioned. They needed 2 first graders to play monkeys. It was Christmas in the Jungle. And the whole school, 8th graders were involved. They had the school band. I mean, it was amazing, right? And I got my first role. I got a costume that was better than my own clothes. I mean, I had a green vest with red pants, little red shoes, curly shoes, little hat, una corna, And then the mask that she made out of mama stock was incredible, Man, I was in heaven. I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, whoa, I'm magic. I am magic. That I needed magic then. We were really poor, living in a labor camp. But this did it. It took me to another level. And then I saw the old school auditorium, much more less beautiful than this theater, okay? It was a beat-up old auditorium, but they started bringing in fake trees, and the band started to key up, and I said, wow, my debut before the world, Me a monkey, In other words, me hola changala, you know what I'm saying? That's a joke, okay? Anyway, chango is monkey, so I went with the changos, I joined the monkey race in that way. But the thing is that the week of the presentation, I come home to the camp, my mother says, we're leaving tomorrow. It's like a Tuesday. I said, Mom, the show is on Friday. And she says, I know, Mijo, but we're being evicted. Well, I cried, and she cried with me, but ni modo. The next morning at dawn, my dad got the truck fixed. We climbed into the back. I'll never forget driving through Stratford, the little town of Stratford where the school was. Not Stratford on Avon, Stratford on the San Joaquin. And I see it recede into the fog, and I felt crushed. A lot of kids can get crushed, I felt a big hole open in my chest, and it could have destroyed me, but again, I've always believed the negative can be turned into a positive. So what happened? One is that I took 3 things. One, the secret of paper mache. That was really something. I never lost that to this day. 2, an unquestionable desire to do theater, an undying, it's still there. Nothing was ever going to take it away. The need was so great that I haven't been able to satisfy it, And the last thing is that anger. I took anger with me for the injustice of being evicted from the labor camp. I blamed it on the labor camp. I blamed it on the growers. So 20 years after that event, I went to Cesar Chavez, having been to college, having written 2 plays, having been in the San Francisco Mime Troupe, but I went to Cesar Chavez and pitched him an idea of a theater of, by, and for farm workers. And that became El Teatro Campesino. And I never knew that we were going to go so far beyond this picket line. Because Cesar said there's no money to do theater in Toledo, he said, when I pitched him the idea. There are no actors, there's no stage, there's no time to rehearse, we're on the picket line night and day, you still want to do it. I said, absolutely, Cesar, what an opportunity, And so I went, I joined, I teamed up with Agustin Lira, who was the first member to join the teatro. He played the guitar. We translated songs from the civil rights movement, from the labor movement into Spanish. No nos moverán, nosotros venceremos, we shall overcome. All these songs, Solidaridad para siempre, Solidarity forever, which is a ballad hymn of the Republic, all of that became then the fighting, the power of the picket line. Because when people sing, they get courage. Okay? You hear stories of, even in World War II, of people going to their deaths singing, before the firing squad. Well, I have been there, believe me, facing the goons, and you're thinking, you're singing, Solidaridad Pacifica, men and women lining up. It was amazing to me. And it came from just playing with song and learning the power of music. And then on top of that, the power of theater. To do theater in the picket line. Cesar was right. We had to organize the teatro on top of flatbed trucks or on top of panel trucks. And it wasn't to entertain the workers, it was to motivate them enough to come out of the field and join us. So we had to be broad and big and powerful and strong. And that became the motivating force that created the Teatro Campesino, that is still creating the Teatro Campesino to this day. Because the arts are not a luxury. The arts are not a plaything of the rich. The arts are a human necessity. We need the arts in order to survive. Yes, actually, express our humanity. And I've mentioned the physicality of it. I like physicality, I love dance. I don't separate dance from theater from whatever. They're all, for me, a continuum. and singing. And so if you're an actor, you know, let me give you a piece of advice. Learn to sing. Learn to dance. It won't be enough just to be an actor. You know, I'm an American playwright, but I see that most American plays are people sitting on their butts talking, and that doesn't do it for me. That's why the movies have totally overwhelmed the theater. It's because of movement. The movies, look at the name, have movement. The camera moves, if nothing else. But in the theater, you gotta move. It's got to have movement. It's got to have movement. Okay? Even when you get to be my age. I'm 76. Ha ha! Vámonos. See what I mean? It's you gotta, it keeps you vibrant, if nothing else. So the thing is that what is the nature of the human being? Physicality and heart. Heart. Empathy. You know, the heart is very important. Because it's through the heart that we reach the mind. It's the empathic communication that gets ideas across. If you're a teacher, you gotta love your students, or you won't be able to teach them. You gotta have respect and regard for your students, even if they're brats. You know, I'm gonna teach you, you know. But they gotta feel it. They feel it. They feel it when there's hostility there. And I remember all my teachers vividly, except for one that was a little mean to me. I don't know that she meant to be, but I forgot her name. I'm sorry. You know that teacher that with the monkey mask and all that? I didn't know her name. I was there. So a few years ago, I was speaking to a conference of superintendents in Monterey, and the current superintendent of that school district, the Stratford School District, was there, and he loved the story. He said, I'm going to go back and check my records. I got to check if I was telling the truth. 2 weeks later, I received in the mail a photostatic copy of the attendance record for the first grade, 1946. It was handwritten. Down at the bottom was the name of Luiz Valdez. And it stated that Louis had been in that school for only 30 days. I was one of those migrant children that came and went with the wind. That teacher didn't know how long I was going to be there, but she got me into my play. So I was really fascinated that at the top of the report was her name. All these years I had not known her name. Her name was Ruth Tremaine. And God bless her. Obviously that's not an Hispanic name. But Ruth, you know, God bless her, she must be 120 years old now, you know, but I think she's still alive maybe, I don't know, you know. But she was older than me, you know. She was fully in her 20s, so she'd be in her 90s, almost 100. Anyway, either case, I don't know if she ever knew what she did for me, that she launched me on my career, that she gave me my first role. And she did it positively. She recognized that I could do it, and so she gave it to me in good heart. But then it was the labor camp that evicted. It wasn't her fault, I wasn't in it. But I credit her as being my first teacher, injecting me with the desire to do theater and the love of the theater. I love theaters. I've been all over the world, and there isn't one single theater space I don't recognize as home. I don't care what country I'm in. I go, oh, yeah, I love this theater, you know. Because love is where it comes from the heart. And through the heart, we reach the mind. And so that's why playwrights are really important. That's why music is important, why art in general. Because the art reaches for the heart. Art communicates the heart. This is why we have culture in the world. In all cultures, in all corners of the world. And it doesn't matter how poor people are. You know, one of the wondrous things about Mexico that has been overlooked, or maybe not looked well enough, is that Mexico as a culture encourages, even no matter how poor you are, if all you've got is corn cobs to work with, man, you make monos out of the corn cobs, you know? You can make pipes, también, but you can do all kinds of things with just the objects that are around you. I call that aesthetic rascuachismo. You know, rascuachi means funky, beat up, you know, you make do, but rascuachismo then became our aesthetic. That the teatro started with whatever we could grab our hand. We had no props. We had signs that we made, that was it. So we had to work with what we had. That became the rascuachi aesthetic. And it's not just farm workers, the rich are into it too. Have you ever been in a rich house with some very rustic kind of artwork, you know? That's what we call rascuachic. So rascuachic becomes an aesthetic in itself. But anyways, the heart is what the arts relate to. The arts go through the heart. up into the mind, and we communicate ideas then. And then the mind becomes a very, very, very potent instrument in your life because it is your direct connection with what you are thinking. Don't allow yourself to be negative. Don't put yourself down. Pick yourself up, young people. Anytime that I get a negative thought, I immediately say, give me a break, Lord. I don't want to think that. I don't want to think that. Even if I'm remembering something bad that happened to me, I don't want to think that. I want to stay positive with myself. Moment to moment, breath to breath, okay? And so the thing is that, what is the meaning of that? You know, positive comes from a word, a Latin root, posit, which means place. To place, a verb, or place, a noun, a place. And so, when you know your place, because all of us has a place, where you come from, what culture you come from, what language you come from, where you are right now. All of that is part of your positivity, that you're placing yourself. I'm going to place myself here. And for the actor in the theater, presence is absolutely essential. So when you walk on stage, and I tell actors, don't just start acting when you come on stage. I want you to start acting way back there in the wings, man, before you come on. Prepare. And don't kill your character before you get off stage. Carry it all the way to the back, because this is placing yourself on stage. You know, and it all has to do with, again, the mental aspect, the mind. But you know something else? Language. Language is connected. We live in a state that, in the past, I mean, it's very multilingual. In the state, they try to impose English only on us. And in Arizona, that fever is still burning. And it's ridiculous. What do you mean English only? Why English only? Why only English? Why would you deny yourself another language? Figuring when your parents speak another language, or your relatives, why would you do that? And because, you know, bilingualism has been demonstrated to be very effective for your brain. The cerebral synapses of your brain work much faster. If you speak half a sentence in English, you know the part in Espanol. Para arriba, para abajo, in the para arriba, down, up and down, in and out. You can do that. You can code switch, code switch, code switch. And I'm not just talking about Spanish. Any language, German, French, Chinese, Arabic, it doesn't matter. People in Europe believe you're not sophisticated unless you know 5 languages. Why in this country, made up of all of the ways of the world, has become so dumb as to insist that we only want one language? Believe me, I love the English language. I was an English major. I've taken great pains to learn how to speak English. I'm still in touch with my English teacher. God bless him, his name is Ed Farrell. I first was taught by him back in 1956. And you know, we were friends now. He's Ed to me, he's not Mr. Farrell, Dr. Farrell. But see, he lives in Austin, Texas. He's got cancer, he's 89 years old. And I was very moved a couple of years ago when he asked, he says, would you do me a favor? And I said, yeah, sure, Ed, anything you want. Will you speak at my funeral? And I said, well, I would love to, but let's not talk about that just now, you know. But I will, because I love the guy. I love the man. He's my teacher. I speak like him. He taught me. He was my speech speaker, my teacher. He was my, he used to say, slow down, Louis, slow down. Because I used to talk real fast. I get the bottom. You want, what? I can speak English. Yeah, I can do it. Okay. Really. He said, slow down, Louis. Pronounce all of your verbs, all of your vowels, and cross your T's, and, you know, dot your I's. So as an actor, it becomes really important to know how to use your language, you know. And I came from a time when the color line was very hard in all theater. I couldn't get on stage because I was dark. I mean, what part are they going to give me, you know? In high school, I did O'Neill, but in college, they said, So the first role that I got was Inherit the Wind. That's a famous play about the monkey trial, the Scopes monkey trial, there you go. The Scopes trial, and I played the organ grinder, the Italian organ grinder, you know, with a little live monkey. Now that little monkey got so scared he used to shit over the organ every night, you know, just calm down. And he died. They didn't take care of him. They put him in a closet and didn't feed him. So I had to get it was terrible. I had to get a new monkey. But the thing is that I saw a picture recently when I was 19 years old, my first college production, there I am at San Jose State in Inherit the Wind. And I'm the only Chicano, the only person of color in that whole cast. But I felt at home, even with that little role. But I didn't get too many other roles. I got Gonzalez in Summer and Smoke, the Tennessee Williams. And I always wondered, why is Tennessee Williams the only American playwright that deals with Mexicans? Because he's not from the Southwest exactly. And then I found out a friend of mine called Greg Barrios, who's a journalist and a playwright out of Texas, wrote a play called Pancho's Rancho. Tennessee Williams had a Mexican lover. He had a Chicano lover by the name of Francisco. And do you know that when he wrote The Streetcar Named Desire, Stanley Kowalski was really Francisco, was really a Mexican. But Tennessee Williams felt it wouldn't play as well if he were a Mexican, so he turned him into a Polish guy. Stanley Kowalski, aka Marlon Brando. Stella! You know? That guy was inspired by a Mexican. A lot of people don't know that. In any case, there we are in Inherit the Wind and Summer and Smoke, but that was it. I couldn't get any. I did a lot of Reader's Theater, and the Reader's Theater helped me then to develop every negative we turned to a positive. I became a narrative speaker, not like just like this. And not only that, I do voice tracks, I do soundtracks for documentaries. I did one recently, it was on PBS. My friend Hector Galan, filmmaker, called me, you want to do this? Sure. I got paid. I did it here in Hollywood, one day, boom. And the next 2 weeks later, it's on PBS, nationally. I've done a lot of those, narratives. You know, and the thing is that you take your training and you go somewhere. But I learned how to speak English in this manner from Mr. Farrell, from Dr. Farrell. And I really appreciate the instruction and the love and the care that he took. You know, when we finally met after a few years, he says, I remember where you used to sit in your junior year in high school. Well, God bless him, man. He remembered where I was in the classroom. That's love. That's why I learned so much from him. And I learned from all of my teachers to some extent, depending on how much they love me, you know? And then I got to love them. So that aspect of the heart to the mind is really important in education, but it's important in politics. It's important in the world that people know. There's nothing to be afraid of, folks. We're all a lot more African American than we've been led to believe. We are who we are because of cultural fusion. We're all more Asian American than we've been led to believe. We've lived among each other. And all the people of color are a lot more white than they know. Of course they are. They've been exposed to Europe. I love the English language. I love Western Europe. So I try to set my friends at ease. Listen, I'm not opposing white civilization. I'm in favor of a colored civilization with all the colors. White and black and red and yellow and purple, you know, all of the colors. Let's put them all in there because you'll be richer. You'll be richer. As a result, the pigmentation, you know, we have colors in here. Black people are not really black. You know, if you put them under a certain kind of light and microscope, black skin is technicolor. It has all of the colors. Well, if you take acid, you can see it, you know. You know what acid is? Yeah. I learned that in San Francisco back in the 60s. You take LSD, these black people are not black, you know, it's an explosion of color, it's amazing. And Mexicanos also and stuff, and everybody has colors of different kinds, which is why costume designers know how to design according to the pigmentation to make somebody look good. And if you know something about yourself, you know what colors work well for you when you dress up and make yourself look good. All of that, again, it's the play of the mind, the body with the heart, with the mind. And finally, by extension, there's the fourth level that the Mayans talked about, and it's the level of the spirit. It's the morality clause, okay? And that is encapsulated by a Mayan concept called Inla'ech. You are my other self. If I love and respect you, I love and respect myself. If I do harm to you, I do harm to myself. You are my other me. That's what I'm saying. The mind is your instrument to connect with all of that out there. With the reality. Reality is what you make it. You can change it. And all of us will die at one time. But are you prepared to deal with that reality? Some people become very religious as a spiritual, as a process of dealing with their own mortality. But it has to be mortal at every second, every breath, because we're always facing it. And you know what? We have to be very wary of our minds, because if you create a monster, it will come to your door. Let me say that again. If you create a monster, it will come to your door. Who gave us Donald Trump? We did. We did. We created Donald Trump. Donald Trump is us. We are Donald Trump. And we have to deal with it. Because Donald Trump has problems. He probably thinks he doesn't. He thinks we have the problems. But I'll grant him that we live in the same planet at the same time. So now we intersect. Our realities are intersecting. How are we going to deal with this? It's going to call for increased activism. Just like way back in 1972 when El Teatro Campesino performed, not here, I think in the gymnasium. We performed in the gymnasium, we opposed the war to Vietnam, and then we told the audience, join us! Right after the show, right at the end of the show, it wasn't a curtain call, it says, action, we want action. So let's march out of this gymnasium and take to the streets here at Whittier College, which is what we did. We took the whole audience with us. It was amazing. We walked out into the street. The campus police came. It was action. It was a protest against the Vietnam War. And we need to scream to high hell about what's happening in Washington today as a result of our elections. But it's going to take the young. It's going to take the young. I'm not exactly exhausted yet, but I'm tired, all right? And the thing is that we fought against the Vietnam War. I lived through the Kennedy assassination, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Bobby Kennedy. I worked on the Viva Kennedy campaign back in 1960. I was a college student. And to see there, my president get shot down, and then they blame it on this one guy, the lone gunman, when as a matter of fact, it became pretty clear. It's absolutely clear now that it was a conspiracy by people at the top, highest level of our government. Now, I'm not a conspiracist. But I think it's time for Americans to stop being naive about their country. We're no different. Someone says we're just like a banana republic. Not quite, but we have some of the same characteristics. We're like Nazi Germany, actually. This could happen to us. So eternal vigilance, as Thomas Jefferson said, is the price of liberty. We need to fight for that eternal vigilance. Why do we go to Mexico? Because Mexico still has problems. Because constitutional government has still a struggle in Mexico. They tried, Benito Juarez tried, the whole Mexican Revolution tried, but they killed all of their leaders. Well, the United States is catching up. We're getting pretty good at killing our leaders, one way or the other. What happened with Hillary was character assassination. Okay, she was my candidate. And the fact that she was a woman on top of that even makes it more egregious. But that doesn't mean that I want to hate. I don't hate anybody. I hate the injustice, but not people. And be careful, because I was there way back when I had that hatred here, politically, against the war in Vietnam, against LBJ. You know, we had our first national tour was in 1967, and we were in Washington, and I met Hubert Humphrey, you know, at the Watergate, before the Watergate was infamous. We were there performing. We performed inside the Senate courtyard of the Senate building, sponsored by the Kennedy brothers, Bobby and Tenny Kennedy, and other senators. And the thing is that we went then to the parties. It was a Friday. We went to parties in Washington, a lot of parties. I mean, senators and congressmen are out there, and the young women are out there, young men. I mean, there's parties all over the place. And we picked up this one guy named Rusty, who had kind of a Texas accent. And he kept riding with us in the van, going to parties, and he said, you know, I like you guys. He says, tell you what, he says, how'd you like to meet LBJ? And I said, LBJ? Yeah, he's a friend of mine. I work with him. He's at the White House. You know, he's kind of lonely these days. It's 1967. It's the height of the Vietnam War. He says, yeah, he's kind of lonely. But you know what? He loves Mexicans. Because he used to teach Mexicans. So why don't we go over there and drop in on him and do a big surprise? That was the first time, because I hated LBJ, but then that was the first moment I realized, well, damn, I wonder if LBJ is lonely. I mean, he may have killed Kennedy, but he's lonely. You know? I didn't know what to make of it. But then suddenly that image, there are human beings in that White House. And most recently, having been in the White House for the presentation of the National Medal of the Arts, we met Obama. And Obama was a revelation to me, to shake his black hand in the White House and to see that he's such a cool human being. I mean, he's the coolest president we've ever had. He's at ease. He's rational. He looks you straight in the eye. He's very approachable. You can talk to him. There have been a lot of criticisms. I don't know what your politics or what you think about him, but I'm telling you, the guy was capable of doing the job. And I voted for him twice, and I think he's still one of our greatest presidents because of the history behind him, of what it took to get him. Yes, give it a applause. Here you go, Obama. And when we get the woman in there, and hopefully it would be Hillary, but when we get a woman president, it'll be as a result of all of the struggles in Seneca Falls and all the history of womanhood to try to achieve parity with men. We need women. You know why? Because women have more heart than men do. Because women are nurtured, and they nurture. And all of us have mothers, all of us have sisters, all of us have grandmothers. You know, and dads are great. I'm a dad, you know. My dad had a lot of heart, you know. But, you know, they're busy, they're working, they're doing this and that, and they're not conditioned to do this. But women, we need that heart of woman in the White House. As a leader, not as the First Lady, as the President. And so someday we'll get there, maybe sooner than we know. Maybe sooner than we know. But things are very, very unpredictable right now. In any case, what is predictable is that none of us are going to live forever. So treat your life with respect. Treat yourself with respect. Love yourself so you can love others. You know, to be Chicano is not to hate the Gabacho. It doesn't mean anything. You know, well, get off this black and white thing. Let's go for all the colors of the human race and respect our heart. And so this has been essentially the path of my life, the path of the heart. That is the theater. As a playwright, as a filmmaker, as a community organizer, as someone who loves community centers, who still works with farm workers. We're still at the edge of the Salinas Valley working with migrant kids, and now they're coming from Mexico, and they don't even speak Spanish. That's how deep the injustice has gone. We're getting people from Oaxaca that speak Triqui or Mixteca, and we're getting their kids, okay, and doing theater with them. Because theater is an international language. The arts are an international language that express and help to answer the question of what is the nature of the human being. What is art? What is art? Thou art. Thou art. And so I'm going to end with three sections, three translations of the same poem. It's a poem written by Netzahualcoyotl, Prince of Texcoco, 1482, 10 years before the coming of Columbus. And the first narration will be in Aztec, in Nahuatl, okay? And here it goes. Tlei mash kikil na mikia kanma chilemian moyolo. Tikti muyol se semana awikpa tikwika, ti muyol pokoloa. Inflal tikpa kanma chtiplal tiu. Now in Spanish. ¿Qué era lo que acaso tu mente hallaba? ¿Dónde andaba tu corazón? Sin rumbo lo llevas. Pues das tu corazón a cada cosa, vas destrozando tu corazón. Sobre la tierra, ¿acaso puedes ir en pos de algo? And now in English. What is it that your mind was looking for? Where is your heart? For this, you give your heart to everything. Your heart is without direction. You are destroying your heart. On this earth, do you suppose you can ever go in search of anything and find it? And so that's the final motto, the final piece of advice. America, find your heart and be free. America, protect your heart and be just. America, know your heart and be what you truly are. I invite you all to come see Zoot Suit. We open previews January 3rd, the new incarnation of Zoot Suit. It continues to grow at the Mark Taper Forum. Opening night, February 12th, will run into March. Ticket sales begin this Friday. Sorry to have to do a commercial, but we're also trying to prove a point here, that in fact, Chicano theater is part of American theater for all Americans. Thank you very much.